said earlier that you've got to make sure that your protocols are followed, and unless there's a protocol violation, people wouldn't be disciplined. I would just say to you, I don't really care that much about your protocols. I think if your protocols don't provide for the fact that when a former president is shot, when an American is killed, when other rally-goers, innocent people who just showed up on the day, when they are shot at and critically wounded, if that isn't a protocol violation prima facie, you should revise your protocols.
Senator, I think this is where you and I agree. This was a failure, and we will get to the bottom. Bottom of it.
Well, I hope you're going to do something about it. Let me ask you something else. The Real Clear Politics reports this morning that you were directly involved in denying additional security resources and personnel, including counter snipers, not just to this event, but over the last 2 years, that President Trump's team repeatedly asked for these additional resources, and you personally were involved in denying them. Is that true?
Senator, as I stated earlier, that is not true.
So you never denied any resources to former President Trump's team?
No, not me. No, sir.
And you weren't involved in any of that? You were never involved in the decision-making?
No, sir, I was not.
Let me ask you just one or two other things here quickly. Well, whistleblowers tell me that, in fact, law enforcement were stationed to be on that roof and that law enforcement abandoned their post because it was too hot. Is that accurate?
Senator, I have heard that as well. Again, they posted up inside. And I think moving forward, as I said earlier, we're going to ensure that state and local counter snipers are on roofs.
But do you know if someone was supposed to be on the roof? Do you know if someone was in fact? That's what the whistleblowers tells me. That may or may not be accurate. Do you know that to be the fact? Was somebody posted to the roof, local law enforcement or whomever?
I do not know that to be a fact.
Well, can I ask you why you don't know that?
Again, Senator, we are looking at this, and they should have been on that roof. And the fact that they were in the building is something that I'm still trying to understand.
I just want to express my frustration, Director, that 17 days or whatever it's been, that whistleblowers are telling us more than you are, and you don't know, you haven't ascertained if there was supposed to be law enforcement on the roof. That seems like a pretty basic fact. I'm also told that local law enforcement suppliers offered the Secret Service drones, and you declined them. Is that true?
So, Senator, one, I've been very transparent and forthcoming.
Your agency has not been transparent and forthcoming, so please, let's not go there.
I have been forthcoming, sir.
That remains to be seen. You've been on the job a few days. So far, you've fired nobody. Now, the drones.
Thank you,
Were
sir.
you offered drones?
Senator Hawley.
So there was an offer to fly a drone on that day.
And why did you deny it?
Again, I think the ability of local law enforcement to provide an asset, we probably should have taken them up on it if it was offered.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rowe, thank you for being here. I agree with what you said at the outset, that the individual Secret Service agents demonstrated remarkable personal courage, putting their bodies in between the line of sight of the shooter and the president. That being said, the bravery of the line agents is quite different from the decisions of Secret Service leadership. Secret Service leadership committed catastrophic security failures, indeed the worst security failures for the Secret Service since 1981, since the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan. It is incumbent upon this committee to determine why those security failures happened. Just after the shooting, Secret Service put out an official statement from your spokesperson that says there's an untrue assertion that a member of the former president's team requested additional security resources and that those were rebuffed. This is absolutely false. In fact, we added protective resources and technology and capabilities as part of the increased campaign travel tempo. Was this tweet accurate?
With respect to Butler, Pennsylvania, it is accurate, sir.
It is accurate that the Trump team had not asked for additional security and had not been rebuffed.
If you're talking about Butler, Pennsylvania, all assets requested were approved. If you're talking about the media reporting of assets requested, there were times when assets were unavailable and not able to be filled, and those gaps were staffed with state and local law enforcement tactical assets.
So I'm reading from the Washington Post, July 20th, 2024. Secret Service said to have denied requests for more security at Trump events. The opening paragraph, top officials of the U.S. Secret Service repeatedly denied requests for additional resources and personnel sought by Donald Trump's security detail in the 2 years leading up to his attempted assassination, according to 4 people familiar with the requests. Is that right, that repeatedly the Trump detail asked for more resources and repeatedly Secret Service leadership turned that down?
That is not accurate, Senator. Assets are requested. There's a process that is made. And
how many requests did the Trump team or the Trump detail ask for?
I can get you that number in a queue.
You don't know now.
So I can speak to the ones that reported in the Washington Post, and we can go through them if you like.
But you don't know how many requests there were.
In general, how many requests since 2021 that the former Trump detail has made a request for assets?
You've had 2 weeks. You had a spokesperson put something out that is false on its face. By the way, did you approve this statement when it went out?
I don't know if I did or didn't, Senator.
Has this spokesperson, is he still employed? Does he still have a job?
He is still employed, Senator.
So he lied on behalf of the Secret Service. He still has a job. Did your predecessor, the former director, did she approve this statement?
Senator, our comms team, they send out statements. They do deconflict them and they put them out.
Did she approve this statement?
I don't know if she did or did not, Senator.
And you don't know if you did either?
I don't recall approving it, Senator.
Will you commit to provide this committee in writing every written request for additional resources from the Trump campaign or the Trump detail and every response from Secret Service?
Senator, I will commit to providing responses and getting you the information that you are seeking.
Let me ask you something. And who makes the decision to deny those requests? Did you make that decision?
Which requests? Are you talking about the ones that were in the Washington Post?
Yes.
So the process, sir, is that a detail will make a request for either staffing, technical assets, that is handled between the field office and the detail. It goes up to a logistics office between our
Okay, so there's a bureaucracy. Is there a decision maker?
It's not a bureaucracy, Senator.
Give me the
it's a
person
process.
that's a decision maker. Is there one?
Senator, it's a conversation. It's not just an absolute yay or nay.
So let me tell you what I believe. I believe that the Secret Service leadership made a political decision to deny these requests. And I think the Biden administration has been suffused with partisan politics. Did the same person who denied the request for additional security to President Trump also repeatedly deny the request for security to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose father was murdered by an assassin and whose uncle was murdered by an assassin? Did the same person make that decision?
Senator, what I will tell you is that Secret Service agents are not political.
Okay, you're not answering my question. But you know what? Leadership appointed by the president, leadership appointed by the president is political. I have a simple question, yes or no. Did the same person deny the Trump request that also denied the RFK request? That's a yes or no question.
Senator, that is not a yes or no question. One, there is a process for a candidate nominee to receive protection.
Does the buck stop anywhere? Does the buck stop anywhere?
Bipartisan process that the Hill
participates in. It's a bicameral, bipartisan process. What cameral?
For a candidate,
you are not a Congress. You don't have a cameral.
Mr. Kennedy submitted a request that was referred over to the CPAC.
Okay, you're refusing to answer the question. Let me ask, because the failures on that day were catastrophic. By the way, is it true that on the day of the Butler event that Secret Service transferred agent from President Trump to the First Lady?
No, sir, that's not true.
That's been widely reported.
It's not true. There was one airport agent that actually went on the manpower request for the Trump detail. They handled the arrival at the airport.
What was the relative size of the Trump detail compared to the detail that is assigned to the President or the First Lady?
Senator, the former president travels with a full shift, just like the president.
So the exact same size? Is that your testimony, that President Trump had the same size detail that President Biden has?
On the day of in Butler, the agents surrounding him, it is the same number of agents surrounding the president today. There is a difference between a sitting president who also not only
Hold on, you're using president in a way that is not clear. Is it your testimony that in Butler, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump had the same number of agents protecting him that Joe Biden has at a comparable event?
I'm telling you the shift, the close protection shift surrounding.
That's a yes
what
or
you
no.
asked me, Senator, and I'm trying to answer it.
You are not answering it. Is it the same number of agents or not?
Senator, there is a difference between the sitting president of the United States.
Then what's the difference?
The difference?
2x, 3x, 5x,
National
10x?
Command Authority to launch a nuclear strike, sir.
I'm not
there are other
asking.
assets
How many more
travel
agents?
with the president that
Sir,
the former president
sir,
will
you are
not get.
refusing to
but
answer
the number
straight.
of Secret Service
Sir,
agents protecting him.
Stop interrupting me.
Go ahead,
You
Senator.
are refusing to answer clear and direct questions. I am asking the relative difference in the number of agents between those assigned to Donald Trump and those assigned to Joe Biden. I'm not asking why you assign more to Joe Biden. I'm asking, is the difference, is it 2x? Is it 3x? Is it 5x? Is it 10x?
Senator, I will get you that number so you can see it with your own eyes.
Senator Marshall, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Rowe, there was probably 10 buildings within sniper range of President Trump on that afternoon. Why was the building being used by the sniper not in the security zone?
That's a question that I've asked, Senator. There was a decision that we were going to construct the site and it was going to maintain within the Butler Farm site, Butler Farm Show site. That building, that AGR, was right on the curtilage of our outer perimeter. And it's something that again, having been there and walked it, I had a hard time understanding.
So there's no protocol that says anything within 300, 500 yards, direct line of the president, should be in or out of the security zone. There's not a protocol that describes that.
So, Senator, what we try to do is we try to either control the high ground or mitigate line of sight concerns.
Okay. You've stated that on multiple occasions, President Trump's team was denied more of a detail, more assets. Who denies that? Who is the person that denies that, generally speaking?
So, Senator, there's a process. Again, there's a conversation had with the detail.
There's got to be a buck stopping. There's got to be someone. Who is the person? Is it a level within the D.C. agencies? Is it someone in the Pittsburgh office? Who denies this?
It has nothing to do with the Pittsburgh office,
Okay.
sir. It is a conversation between not only the detail, the field office, but also.
I don't want to know the conversation. I want to know who makes the decision.
The decision, sir, is it's our process between the Office of Protective Operations and the Office of Investigations.
Is there a title for this position?
It is called we affectionately call it the War Room, and it's where all of our logistics files into.
So it's a room that makes the decision.
It is a staffing and assignments officer.
Okay. Is the Secret Service required to do a briefing with all entities of law enforcement involved in the event of the days leading up to the event and the day of the event?
We do a police meeting, sir, where we start the initial
So it's required.
process.
Is it required? Is it part of your standard operating procedure?
The police meeting is what initiates the advance, and that is what is required.
Was this meeting held on that day?
The police meeting took place on the days prior to that.
Do you have documents of that meeting was actually happened?
If we do, sir, I will get them to you.
But you're saying that it did not happen on the day of the event.
So I think what you're referring to is a briefing that the state and locals would have done with themselves. We did a briefing with our own folks. They briefed.
When did you? Did your people meet with local law enforcement the day of the assassination attempt?
Yes.
Okay, and you realize that the local law enforcement says no, that meeting never happened, and that's why we need to get these people in to talk to us, and this is why the FBI needs to be speaking up sooner than later and say that meeting did or didn't happen. Surely there's some type of documentation of that meeting one way or the other. Is there documentation of that meeting?
So, Senator, I can tell you that what you're referring to is the counter sniper team seconded to Butler ESU. Our personnel met with the team lead from Butler ESU, and they discussed areas of concern, areas of responsibility, and that did in fact happen at the site on that day.
Director, I think you would agree with me that there were multiple individual and institutional failures the day of this assassination attempt. You have a $3 billion budget. You're still 2,000 employees short. And in 2022, the Secret Service had a 48% departure rate. That tells me you either have a cultural problem or just gross incompetence. Which one is it?
So, Senator, I would challenge that 48% departure rate. Let me get you some statistics that we have. It is not 48%.
But go back to the multiple failures that we saw on an individual basis as long as systemic. I think it proves that there's either incompetence or some type of a cultural problem within the SS.
So, Senator, I know you're not calling our workforce incompetent, and I know we do not have a cultural problem. If anything, we are dedicated to making sure that we don't have mission failure. And let me get you the hiring numbers that we have, because I think you will actually see that, no, we've actually done very well fairly recently with trying to make sure that we have the numbers that we need. Of course, we need more people. Everybody does. But let me get you those numbers, and I think let your own eyes
Would you
see.
also disagree with me when it's reported that almost 50% of the rank and file officers don't trust leadership within the Secret Service?
Senator, I think it's the right of every worker to talk bad about their boss.
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Hirono, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, there is a lot that the Secret Service has to answer for in this stunning security failure. But I do want to follow up on Mr. Abate's testimony that an online profile of the shooter may have been found, and you said it contains anti-Semitic and anti-immigrant postings. Can you elaborate? Have you found anything further in the shooter's profile?
Senator, this was just discovered, as I mentioned, and it's being closely analyzed right now. We need to verify that it is, in fact, that it belonged to the now deceased shooter and that he made these comments. So that's why I felt it important in the interest of transparency to share that here, but add the caveat that we still have a lot of work to do, which we're working on quickly to determine that. It's of importance, I think, because if it is, in fact, the shooter that posted these comments, it's the first real indication where he's expressing what are described as extremist views and talking about political violence.
I take it that once you determine that it was, in fact, the shooter who posted these kinds of comments, that you will let the public know as well as this committee?
Absolutely, Senator.
I think, in fact, it is very important that many of the perpetrators of mass shootings, et cetera, have these kinds of postings online that are very anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic, anti-everything. And it is really important as we determine the kind of profile for many of these shooters that we understand how critical it is that we are careful, how critically important it is that people are careful about what they're posting online, the misinformation, disinformation, everything else along those lines. This is for Mr. Abate once again. What kind of firearm, what kind of weapon did Crooks use in the assassination attempt?
This was an AR-15 style rifle manufactured by a company named Panther Arms.
And once again, many of the persons involved in these kinds of mass shootings use this particular kind of weapon. We know from similar hearings that the Judiciary Committee has had that we are a nation awash in guns. In your view, shouldn't we be doing more to prevent the easy accessibility of these kinds of firearms in our country?
Senator, we're focused on collecting the facts here, and I'm not going to comment on something like that.
Well, I know that that there is a hesitancy to ask about firearms and all of that, and I should think that as a law enforcement person that you probably have some opinions along those lines, but you don't want to articulate what to many people in our country. There's a causal factor here, the easy accessibility of guns. And I want to ask that question because I think it's important that the American people understand that, we are a nation that is awash in guns, and we have more mass shootings than any other country, and yet we have been unable to pass the kind of laws that prevent these kinds of firearms to be easily available, that we have not done enough to promote gun safety in our country. And Mr. Chairman, I wanted to articulate that as the elephant in the room that nobody wants to address, including apparently our law enforcement officers, I am disappointed in that. But obviously, we have work to do to create a much safer environment and to prevent persons who have these kinds of ideological perspectives and who are, I would say, who have these kinds of profiles to have such easy accessibility to the kind of firearms that can cause mass death and destruction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Langford, recognized for your questions.
Chairman, thank you. Thank you to both of you for the testimony today. Director Rowe, future Vice President J.D. Vance was in my state this past week in Oklahoma City. I talked with some of the Secret Service folks that are there. They're doing a terrific job. I got a chance to be able to thank them personally for the tasks they're doing, and I know the Oklahoma folks in Secret Service, and they're very dedicated, incredibly sharp people on that team. So I know this is a challenge to all Secret Service. This is something every Secret Service agent wakes up every single day and wants to avoid. So please continue to be able to pass on our gratitude for the work they do every single day and for what's happening out there. I appreciate that. Mr. Bate, I want to ask you about some of the interviews that have happened. Y'all have done more than 400 interviews at this point. For the counter sniper team that was local law enforcement that was on the second floor overlooking that rooftop, have they been interviewed at this point?
Yes, Senator, I believe that each of them have been interviewed.
Do you know offhand if they were at their post at that time, able to look across that? They were at that post at sometimes. Do we know they were at that post at 6:08 to 6:11?
My understanding, and I want to be fair, I have not read the reports directly, but I've been briefed on some of it. They were at times during the time frame we're talking about here on post within the AGR building. And I do believe, but I would want to confirm this at some point, one or more did venture out in an effort to locate and isolate the.
We understand from the timeline that they were also looking for this individual that was suspicious, that they had left that post to be able to try to look for him on the ground at different points to try to be able to see if they could get a different perspective. What we're trying to figure out is during that time period that he actually climbed on the roof, assembled a firearm or took a firearm with him or picked one up, whatever it might have been there, that they were able to actually see him if they were able to look left, as been acknowledged in the photos that are up there.
Senator, I don't know the exact timing and the movements of each officer that was out there, but what I would derive from it is they were all focused on locating this shooter,
right,
the suspicious person at the time. And then, as we've all seen, the one officer attempted to get on the roof directly. There were efforts going on in those final minutes, right, on the video to try to get to this person.
We've got one officer being boosted up by another officer, yes, to look up on the roof because people on the ground had said there's someone up there and they have a gun that's crawling on that roof. And so they climbed up to be able to see it. He turned around with a rifle. He came down. And then at that point, he gets on the local radio that he has and says there's someone on the roof with a gun. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator, I believe that that's accurate.
So what's the rest of the radio communication? We've heard that first call in. We know it's about 30 seconds from the time he called in till the actual first shot rang out. What else was discussed on the radio during that 30-second time period?
Senator, we have the radio communications. The local radio communications were recorded and captured, and we do have that as part of the investigation. The key points to me, that local officer communicating that he sees the individuals, he's armed. That's at about 6:11 in some seconds. I think it's 3 seconds. And then he identifies it as a long gun at about 6:11 and 11 seconds. And the shots, which all happen quickly together, I believe happen within probably 30 seconds.
So we're talking about over the radio because there's a command center there
yes,
where all radios, including the local, they are all being listened to try to be able to review. There's a statement that has the word gun in it that's coming out across that radio. We only know that first communication. We don't know what came back and forth on that. We'd like to get transcripts of that conversation that was done in local law enforcement. But coming into that command center, there's also the word gun coming through one of the radio frequencies. I would think that would be communicated pretty quickly to everybody across the spectrum. 30 seconds is not long, but that's an NFL play plus a huddle plus the next play. I mean, yes, that's quite a bit of time still to be able to respond. When Secret Service moved to be able to protect the president once the first shots were fired, within 2 seconds, they're gathered around him. So trying to be able to figure out where the word gun got lost in radio communication here and what else was said.
Certainly we will share the communications
May 21 registrants na. Kaso, kulang pa tayo sa fundraising.
Hindi pwede para sa mga bata.
It appears that there was an offer by a state or local agency to fly a drone on our behalf, and I'm getting to the bottom as to why we turned that down.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Kennedy, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Abate, am I saying your name right?
Yes, Senator, thank you.
You are the Deputy Director of the FBI, is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Is there any doubt in your mind or in the collective mind of the FBI that President Trump was shot in the ear by a bullet fired by the assassin crooks?
Senator, there is absolutely no doubt in the FBI's mind whether former President Trump was hit with a bullet and wounded in the ear. No doubt, there never has been.
Okay.
I've been part of this investigation since the very beginning, and that has never been raised.
You're sure?
Yes.
It wasn't a space laser.
No.
It wasn't a murder hornet.
Absolutely not.
It wasn't Sasquatch.
No, Senator.
It was a bullet.
It was a bullet, Senator. 100%.
Fired by crooks
Yes, sir.
that hit President Trump in the ear and almost killed him.
100%, Senator.
Okay, glad we cleared that up. I don't want to get off the subject here. Did the FBI just settle 2 lawsuits, one wholly, one in part, in which the FBI agreed to give Peter Strzok $1.2 million and Ms. Lisa Page $800,000?
It's my understanding, Senator, that the Department of Justice was involved in that, not the FBI.
The FBI had nothing to do with it?
There may have been consultation with our general counsel's office, but
Does the FBI have to sign off on it?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't believe so, but I would want to confirm that.
I would like you to, this would be the same Lisa Page who said to Mr. Strzok, quote, Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right. To which Mr. Strzok said, quote, no, he won't. We will stop it. That's the Peter Strzok and Lisa Page I'm talking about. I need to know if the FBI signed off on this lawsuit.
We will get that
settlement.
answer for you, Senator.
And then I need to know who signed off on it. Did you sign off on it?
I absolutely did not and would never sign off on something
Did Chris
like that.
Wray sign off on it, the settlement?
I don't believe he did.
Okay. You don't know what?
Nor do I think he would have.
You need to let me know who signed off on this, if anyone at the FBI. So it was Merrick Garland who agreed to do this. Is that right?
Senator, I do not know.
Well, hell,
who signed
somebody
off
had
on
to
that.
agree to it. I've settled a lawsuit before. The client's got to agree to it. You're the client. All
Understood. I'm gonna direct in to the Department of Justice to answer
right.
those
Get
questions.
me that information if you would. Mr. Rowe, help me understand this. The assassin crooks fired his first shot, as I understand it, at 6:12 p.m. He was about 150 yards away. It's been reported that the snipers, the government snipers, saw him on the roof 20 minutes before. Not 2 minutes, 20 minutes before. Is that correct?
Senator, that's first time I'm hearing this. That is not correct based on the information I have right now, sir.
Well, when did the FBI snipers see him on the roof?
Just Secret Service sniper, sir. I mean,
I'm sorry, you're right.
That's
Secret
an insult,
Service
sir.
sniper.
No, I'm just kidding.
I understand. I apologize. When did the Secret Service snipers, one of whom ultimately shot the assassin crooks, first see him on that roof?
So, sir, immediately upon the shots being fired, our snipers.
I know that, but when did they first see him? You got a guy lying on a roof.
Yeah.
You got snipers in an elevated position. They can look down on the roof. You got the guy lying there with a gun pointed at the former president of the United States. And they shot him. Good for them. He's now dead as Woodrow Wilson, and that's a good thing. I'm sorry. God forgive me, but it's a good thing. But when did the snipers first see him?
As soon as he presented himself as a target and a threat to the president, sir.
And when was that?
He fires initially a volley. I believe it was 3 shots.
No, he fired at 6:12 p.m.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's the first shot.
So within 15.5 seconds of the first shot, he's
Here's
neutralized.
what people are asking.
Yes, sir.
He was up, Crooks was up there. The snipers at some point saw him,
Yes, sir.
our snipers, because they killed him.
Yes, sir.
When did they first see him? It has been reported repeatedly that the snipers first saw him 20 minutes before. That's more than a quarter in an NFL football game.
Yes, sir.
You don't know the answer?
So I do know the answer, sir. I'm telling you that.
What is the answer?
No,
When
they did not see him. They only
They never saw him.
No, sir.
Well,
did not.
how could they not see the guy? How could they not see him? They're in an elevated position. They're checking rooftops. They're looking around.
Yes, sir.
There's 2 government snipers. How could they not see him? There he was, big as Dallas, lying there with a gun pointed at the president. How could they not see him?
I believe he was obscured by that roof, sir. He did not pop up.
The roof is flat with ridges.
He's below the line where they would have seen him, sir. There is he did have concealment. I'm not going to say it's cover. He did have concealment, and then ultimately gets into firing position and fires. And within 15.5 seconds of his first shot, he's neutralized.
I've gone way over. You gentlemen need to answer these questions. Mr. Deputy Director, get me that information about those lawsuits.
Senator Rosen, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Chair Peters, and Ranking Member Paul for holding this important hearing on the attempted assassination of former President Trump. I am grateful for everyone's service and dedication. However, it's critical that this committee get to the bottom of what happened that day so that we can prevent any future catastrophic security failures and ensure that nothing like this happens again. And so, Director Rowe, given that the event took place in a rural area, we've talked a lot about connectivity issues. Was law enforcement at a disadvantage due to a lack of or limited connectivity? And why has the Secret Service not adopted a dedicated satellite-enabled Wi-Fi connection, which would facilitate integrated communication, enable device connectivity to include drones, and allowing for the sharing of real-time intelligence?
So, Senator, thank you for that question. So, based on what I've seen, that radio connectivity, cellular was an issue that day. With respect to the satellite broadband, that is something that I've tasked our CIO, and then we're getting some support from the Department of Homeland Security on. So we will start to leverage whatever asset we have to ensure that connectivity.
Well, I can tell you that we have those SEER ratings in Homeland Security, those special event ratings that we have for things like the Super Bowl. We have it a lot in Las Vegas, and they do bring these mobile units to be sure that we have all the dedicated Wi-Fi cell service and integration that is absolutely necessary for securing a huge event. And so I look forward to hearing about that. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about intelligence for lone wolf actors, because although we have not been made aware of any specific intelligence the Secret Service or others had in the shooter before the event, we do know that we have intel on Iranian threats against the former president. And so again, Acting Director Rowe, could you talk to us about how you utilize intelligence collection as a way of mitigating threats from state actors like Iran compared to what you do, compared to lone wolf actors, what it seems to be like the attempted assassin that we have here in Crooks. And what are the specific challenges with the intelligence collection as a mitigation tool against lone wolf actors versus state actors?
So Senator, first let me preface by saying the Secret Service is not a member of the intelligence community. However, we are their biggest consumers of information, and we receive that information regularly, especially as it pertains to our protective mission and the people that we protect. We have embeds with the FBI through their National Joint Terrorism Task Forces. Our agents are basically embeds and are able to not only receive information but also follow up on investigations that may have a nexus or a direction of interest towards one of our protectees. We have an excellent working relationship with the FBI. We have an excellent working relationship with the intelligence community. We are not collectors. We are consumers of finished analytic products that the intelligence community of the FBI produces. We ingest them, and then we use that to adjust our protective posture. And we do this daily, weekly, all of the time. And it's not only for protectees, but also the events and sites that we protect on a permanent or temporary basis. With respect to largely a lot of the people that come to our attention, in the case of the assailant, to me, as I overlay him over top of, say, John Hinckley, who tried to shoot President Reagan, I see an individual based on the information that I have now, some of the great work that the FBI has done. We have an individual who's a loner. We have an individual who was focused on Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Hinckley traveled the 80 campaign, and we know that he followed President Carter. It just, on March of '81, he happened to show up in Washington, D.C., and he saw an opportunity to try to attack President Reagan. So when it comes to the Secret Service, and 1981 was a watershed moment for us. We have people that are, for whatever reason, fixated on carrying out an attack against the President of the United States or one of our protectees. And in this instance, you have the assailant who was a loner. Obviously, he was researching. He had researched the Democratic National Convention. He had researched and Googled or used a search engine about the president, the former president. And so I think he had moved towards an idea that he was going to try to do something. And so when I look at this, we don't have a challenge with the FBI or the intelligence community. I think what we always try to wrestle with is trying to line up and see people as they're starting to head down a pathway towards violence. And it's something that we have spent a lot of time and resources in with our National Threat Assessment Center to try to gain a better understanding so that we can help our agents in the field as they're doing these protective intelligence cases and these investigations to be able to make a determination, is somebody genuinely a threat, or do they need mental health, or do they need some other type of service?
Thank you. I appreciate that. My time's over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cotton, you're recognized for your questions.
At the onset, I want to express, as many members have, as President Trump did, the admiration and respect for the bravery and skill of the officers who were on site that day, Secret Service officers, as well as all the local law enforcement. As it happened, my 9-year-old son was watching with me that afternoon, and it was hard to get him to turn away from it. And he asked who all those men and women were who jumped on Mr. Trump. And I said, in layman's terms, those are his bodyguards. And he said, what are they doing? I said, they're protecting him from a bullet. And he said, actually? And I said, yes. He said, for real? And I said, yes. And it was hard for him to process that. But as a reminder, I told him that there are men and women in the Secret Service and law enforcement and the military who are willing to die for our country. And it's an important lesson, I think, that everyone should take away from this, that you had very brave men and women on the ground there who were doing their job to protect this country, to protect a former president and a nominee for president, as they do every day for so many other protectees. Obviously, there were failures in the planning and preparation for this event. Mr. Rowe, we've heard that the shooter had a golf rangefinder. Was that not on the list of prohibited items at an event like this?
Currently, it is not on the list of prohibitive items, but we're going to make that change, Senator.
John Kennedy can't get into an LSU football game with a flask.
Yeah, I can.
Well, he probably can, but he's not supposed to. It just seems like common sense that you don't need a laser rangefinder at an event like this. And it feels like that a lot of that was just the lack of common sense being exercised, are officers not empowered on the front line to use common sense to say, like, if a guy has a laser rangefinder, he should be detained or at least stopped, and that's why he's carrying it around. If you have a building like this that's not secure from 150 meters away, someone, even the front line, lowest level, most junior officer, should be able to kind of like send up the red flag immediately and say, like, we need to halt everything right now and figure out what the hell is going on. I mean, do officers not feel empowered to use that kind of common sense?
I would hope they would, Senator. I can tell you from our uniform division officers that run our magnetometer screening, they do a tremendous job. And even though something may or may not be on the prohibitive items list, they are well trained and they do exercise that good common sense.
And you want this important message. Okay, I want every one of your officers all around the country to hear that their acting director wants them to exercise common sense. It doesn't have to be policy or protocol or procedure. They should exercise common sense. Thank you for that. So it was reported right before Ms. Cheadle's hearing last week that, in fact, President Trump's detail had requested more resources and those had been denied. She said that she did not deny those resources. You've testified this morning that you did not either. So who did? I mean, the Secret Service is not the post office. It's not this vast bureaucracy.
Right.
Like, I'm not surprised to hear that you knew the counter sniper. It's a small agency, and you have a lot of career officers. Like, surely you've gotten to the bottom by now on whose desk this request landed and who denied it.
So, Senator, sometimes when they make a request, they may not have the asset available. For example, there may be, instead of the detail may say, hey, we want 15 magnetometers. What we'll look at it based on what the event size, we'll say, hey, listen, we're going to send 10 based on our protocols of screening so many. We have a flow rate of how many people we can put through. When it comes to a counter sniper or something like that, because I know that's been the subject of some media reporting where they have requested counter snipers. We do have a finite number of counter snipers. And so what we try to do is if we cannot fill that asset, and that's where we'll say, hey, we can't fill this assignment. However, through the field office, they will use local law enforcement resources. And so in those situations, for example, in the one that has been the subject of a lot of reporting with Pickens, South Carolina, they in fact did use local assets to be able to do that. And there were 3 counter sniper teams. One of them was formerly with the Secret Service Uniform Division. And so they actually used the same practices that we use. So it's not that there was a drop in the capability. They actually used the best practices that we would use. So the asset may be denied by Secret Service between the war room and that conversation with the detail in the field, but that doesn't equate to a vulnerability or a gap.
Okay, one final question about the Iran threat. As you know, Iran made credible threats against several former Trump administration officials, many of whom still have government-provided security details to this day. Ms. Cheadle removed Secret Service protection from Robert O'Brien last year. Were you involved in that decision?
So, Senator, he was a memorandum protectee. Meaning that the president authorized protection for him. We do not weigh in on who gets protection.
Why? So you're still protecting some others. I won't reveal their names. But you are still protecting others, and other personal security offices in the federal government are protecting others. Other officials don't reveal their names. Like who made the decision that Robert O'Brien no longer needed a security detail, despite Iran's ongoing credible threats?
So I can tell you, sir, it wasn't the Secret Service. We don't factor into that decision.
Can you take a look at why that happened now that you're in charge and consider the possibility that he might still need that protection, given all of his counterparts in the Trump administration still have protection?
I will do so, Senator.
Go ahead.
You go ahead. Go ahead.
I would say, like, again, I'm not going to reveal the protective details, but I'm pretty confident that the agency can get this done. And I think it needs to get done if you look at the kind of ongoing threats that he and all these others face.
Yeah, I will, sir.
Despite all the resource constraints we've talked about today, he's not the president of the United States. He doesn't have an 18-car motorcade, nor do any of the others. I think he needs that protective detail. And now that you're in charge, I'm asking you to take a new look at that and also talk to your supervisors inside the department about whether you can spare just that small, limited amount of resources, okay?
Senator Welch, you're recognized for your question.
I will, sir.
Thank you very much. You know, there's, first of all, thank you both for the tremendous work you do and for all the folks behind you and under you. So thank you for that. I kind of want to follow up a little bit on Senator Cotton. You know, there's three issues that have been raised. One is the selection of who gets protection, and you've addressed that just now. The other is whether it's a budget issue, which I don't necessarily think it is. But then there's the operational question. Was this an operational failure? And it appears to me that's where the focus should be. And one of the issues on the operations is the capacity of people who are part of the team, both Secret Service and also the local law enforcement, their capacity to act on what they see. And this is what Senator Cotton, I think, was talking about with common sense. You know, you mentioned that the sniper was authorized immediately to act. He wasn't checking in with anyone, right? And he took out the shooter as quickly as he could. But according to the timeline, you had local law enforcement captured 2 photographs of the shooter at 5:10. At 5:32, local law enforcement officers spot a suspicious person who turned out to be the shooter with a phone and a rangefinder. At 5:46, the alert was so significant that snipers text photo of the shooter from where he was initially spotted to the USS lead sniper. I mean, how is it that where you had these experienced law enforcement people who understood the gravity of the responsibility of protecting the presidential candidate, the former president, none of these actionable observations resulted in action? I'll direct that first to you, Deputy Director Abate.
Thank you, Senator. From the FBI standpoint, we're simply collecting the facts. We've interviewed most of the officers. Now we'll end up interviewing all of them.
Okay, well, good. Assistant Director or Acting Director Rowe.
So on that, Senator, I think there was a sense of this guy is standing out, and that's why he came to the attention of local law enforcement.
No, I get that. That's my point.
Right.
He did stand out.
Correct.
But nothing happened.
Well,
I mean, there were alerts, but there was like, you've got somebody suspicious. Why didn't somebody go interact with the suspicious person, like right away?
And they were attempting to locate him. I can't answer that question as to why, if they took a picture of him and they thought he was unusual, suspicious, not acting normal, why there wasn't. And I think, again, there was probably an assumption on the part of that officer that took that picture that, oh, some uniform or somebody will go eventually and walk up to this.
Well, see, that's what seems like an operational failure. Somebody else will do it. So is the responsibility of an officer to alert some other officer that they think somebody might be suspicious, or the first officer who sees a suspicious person can take the next step to actually engage that person or talk to someone very, very close to it and say engage that person? And this guy was wandering around for quite a while.
He was. I can't put myself in the mind of that officer.
I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking, this is operationally, how does the process work? Okay, so that is the job of the leaders as opposed to the officers. Are they empowered to act immediately upon the observation of someone who looks very suspicious, particularly when they've got the rangefinder? They were in a place where it really wasn't about seeing the rally. It was, as we see, it was a place where you get a good view of former President Trump. I mean, that is a leadership issue, right?
So, Senator, that officer didn't work for me. That was a state and local officer that made that observation, took that picture. I can tell you from the Secret Service perspective, and we do this routinely is that when people come to our attention, we locate them, we go up, we do a field interview, or we try to do a consensual encounter.
That's the operational thing I'm talking about. If you do it within Secret Service, you all are in charge, and you are relying on local law enforcement assets. Those folks, and they did their job here up to a point where they identified this person, passed information along, but nobody acted. The empowerment to that local officer, I would think, has to come, be transmitted through the Secret Service, maybe in the earlier briefings, but, you know, where you say, you know, folks, you see somebody suspicious, you engage that suspicious person.
I don't disagree, Senator, and it goes back to my comments at the beginning of the hearing that we need to be very direct to our local law enforcement counterparts so that they understand exactly what their expectations.
I yield back. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Tillis, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Abate, Mr. Rowe, thank you for being here. Mr. Rowe, do you have a picture? I was watching your testimony earlier. Do you have a photograph of the vantage point from the Secret Service snipers?
I do. Let's see.
And there were two, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Stage left and stage right.
Okay. And I don't know if you have a vantage point of both of them or not. I know you had one for the one who ultimately shot the.
That's the vantage point of the sniper who neutralized the assailant.
Okay. Well, is it a similar vantage point for the other? Would they have also been impaired in terms of actually seeing him until he popped his head up?
So the sniper on the stage right side, Senator, they had an obstructive view because of that tree.
They had an obstructive view. Okay. Yeah. So the one thing, this discussion that I don't believe that a sniper saw someone on the roof 20 minutes before just doesn't make sense to me. It sounds like the one who took the shot probably saw him for the first time about a split second before he pulled the trigger. Is that?
That's my assessment, Senator.
I'm more, well, first off, I'd like to clarify the requests that have been made of a lot of people so that we get the information in a good form. I think it would be helpful, at least all the way back to, I think, November 5th of 2022, I believe, when President Trump announced that he was running for re-election. I think it'd be helpful if we could just get a matrix of any request for additional security, the resolution of that request. Was it honored? Was it denied? Was it downsized? If you could give us that, I think that that's going to be the best way versus giving us mounds and mounds of paper. If you can do that, I know you're looking at the same thing. I've heard from you that any subsequent requests for field requests are being honored. I believe that that's true. Is that your testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm more worried about the 24 to 30 seconds between the time I believe local law enforcement officer was hoisted on the shoulders of another police officer, saw a person armed less than 200 yards away from the president, who I believe jumped down. What happened in those 24 or 30 seconds? I mean, obviously there's no such thing as a panic button. You know, the first thing you'd think is you hit panic, you cover the president, get him off stage. None of that happened. What happened? Is it just, did I hear a text message? What actually happened in the 30 seconds where a law enforcement officer knew that a gun was pointed in the direction of the president from a fairly short range? What actually did those folks who did have knowledge of exactly what was happening and could probably infer what was about to happen, what did they do? And Mr. Abate or Mr. Rowe, either one, based on your interviews.
Thank you, Senator. From the interviews, you know, the officers in the immediate vicinity were operating with urgency at that point to get to this person, but he was on the roof. The officer who had looked over the edge, based on what I've been told, the shooter turned toward him with the rifle. That's what the officer observed. So he was under threat himself in that second. So he had to retreat and step down and get back to the ground in order to protect himself and keep him safe from potential rifle fire. But once he got to the ground, along with the other officers, there were Butler County local officers, Pennsylvania State Police. They were moving around trying to find someone to get to this guy.
We've got an operational problem here because we had more than 20 seconds to have somehow cut through all the crap and the communications, whatever impediments there were, have to be removed. I mean, it's pretty clear to me. First off, that law enforcement officer, I love law enforcement. I wear the back of the blue pin every day. They do great work. Secret Service did phenomenal work on the stage. But they failed because their job is to protect the public. And they needed to put themselves in harm's way to stop him. Now, I'll let the interviews go through, but there was a massive failure. There were at least 2 law enforcement officers that knew a guy was about to pull the trigger at the president. And, you know, I'm just not really happy with the fact that we couldn't have communicated, covered President Trump, and try to secure the situation. I'm going to let the investigation go through, but I think it's go forward. I think it's very important to point out that we can't let a scenario go in the future where 20 seconds can lapse when a law enforcement officer within 2 football fields of a former president of the United States has material knowledge that somebody's about to get shot at on stage, and we don't have instantaneous response. You know, in the old days, maybe you just shoot a gun in the air. I know for a lot of reasons why they didn't do that, but there had to be some way to actually diffuse that situation. It didn't happen on July the 13th. I just want to end by saying, Mr. Rowe, I think you've been forthcoming in your answers. I know you're frustrated. I've seen you twice now. You're clearly embarrassed by what happened. You don't think there's any reasonable explanation. And to my colleagues who are worried about communications, they should spend time in their local government and state legislatures to understand just how bad communication is between law enforcement and first responders. We need to invest in this infrastructure. That was also a part of the failure. But if you can please get to me and get to this committee a chronology of requests, accepted, denied, and the reasons for, I think that's going to be very helpful.
I will, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Blackburn, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to each of you for your patience and for being here today. Director Rowe, I want to come to you first because a counter sniper has decided to speak out about the culture at your agency, and I think it is very telling. And he sent an email, and I'm going to quote from that. If this agency needs to change, and if not now, when? The next assassination in 30 days? But here's what I want to talk with you about, because in this email, he says, and I'm quoting again, the motto of the USSS is CYA. And every supervisor is doing it now. That's the end of his quote. So you're the guy in charge. And you're one of those supervisors. You've been a career guy there at the Secret Service. The public has lost trust in the ability to execute the mission, to protect. And I want to know how you feel about the fact that employees in your agency are worried about covering their behind and not worried about protecting a former president.
Thank you, Senator. So I am hurt by that email, but not in the way you think I'm saying it. I'm hurt because my people are hurting right now. We need them.
Then why did somebody delete the email?
I'll get back to you on that, Senator.
The agency deleted the email.
But look, may I address your question?
Yes, please.
I will get back to you as to whether
Yes.
the email was deleted or not. My agency is hurting. Emotions are raw. I actually want to hear more from that UD officer, that technician. In his email, he referenced that he had spent time serving our nation as a United States Marine, that he is a 20-year professional of the Secret Service. I am committed to being a change agent, meaning I am committed to reviewing some of these things. I looked at the points in his email very quickly. I saw it as I was on my way over here this morning. I want to have further conversations, not only with him, but also the counter sniper supervisor.
If I may step back in, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you want to talk with him. What about other whistleblowers? What about this culture? Are you going to allow these whistleblowers to speak out? Because it is troublesome if somebody went into the server and deleted that email. I would hope you will get to the bottom of that and be able to provide some answers. because this is, as you have heard from both sides, this is a situation that cannot be allowed to happen again,
Yes, ma'am.
ever. Mr. Abate, and am I saying your name properly? We've heard it pronounced 3 different ways today in the hearing.
Abate, Senator.
Abate, okay.
Thank you.
You had mentioned a social media account that espoused anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic views, but you did not say what platform that was on and what the username was. And this is Crooks that we're discussing.
Yes, Senator, that's correct. I didn't want to comment on it because we haven't fully confirmed yet, and I thought that as soon as we confirm and certify,
Would
I
you
will
supply
provide that
that?
to you.
And
Absolutely.
also the age at which he had those feelings. And then we understand that the Gab account is pro-immigration, pro-lockdown, leftist views. Is that accurate?
I haven't seen it directly, but I believe from what I've been told,
And how fresh is that Gab account?
the tab account, based on my recollection, the comments in there or the messaging is from about 2021, I believe.
Okay. And the other preceded that? Maybe he was age 14?
Yes, Senator. The other account that we talked about was in the 2019-2020 timeframe, so it would have been in the couple of years right before the Gab.
Right before that.
Yes.
Are there other accounts that you all are currently verifying and receiving information from?
We are. We've, as I mentioned, we've issued a bunch of legal process, and we're still awaiting returns from a number of the companies, to include other social media companies as well.
Okay. Well, my time has expired. Thank you for your patience today. Thank you for the information. We look forward to getting more information. And Director Rowe, we are going to hold you to being a change agent because things at the Secret Service absolutely have to change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I want to thank our witnesses for your testimony here today. Certainly what happened on July 13th could and should have been prevented from what I have heard today. I'm certainly grateful to our witnesses for their candid answers and for helping to provide additional clarity and new information about the circumstances surrounding this attack. Acting Director Rowe, some of what you have said today conflicts with information and accounts that we have received from local law enforcement that we've had the opportunity to talk with. They have been voluntarily and I will say expeditiously cooperating with our bipartisan investigation, which we certainly appreciate. But we now need to speak with Secret Service agents directly, who are directly involved. And I would say that you need to make them available as soon as possible. Those interviews can't start weeks from now or months from now. Time is of the essence when memories are fresh and you can get the information that is most important to us. So my question for you as we wrap up this hearing, Acting Director Rowe, will you commit to having those agents available for this committee to interview as soon as possible in a matter of days, not weeks, matter of days?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Certainly the American people deserve to know what went wrong, and they deserve accountability for those security failures. And as we continue our bipartisan investigation into security failures that day and any underlying systemic issues, we'll continue working to follow the facts, get clear answers. Investigation into security failures that day and any underlying systemic issues. We'll continue working to follow the facts, get
Clear answer.
In an instant. 2 others remain seriously injured. Their futures uncertain. The lives of law enforcement officers working the event and those in the audience have been forever changed. Yet the media has shamefully moved on to other stories, and Google has been caught trying to suppress iconic images of a bloody Donald Trump, images showcasing the resolve of our nation in the face of the attack. But the American people have not forgotten, and we will not forget. There is no question that this was a monumental failure by the Secret Service. They had one job, and they failed. We know that. What remains unclear is who specifically failed, how they failed, and what must be done to ensure that something like this never happens again. America deserves to know that those responsible for this failure are, frankly, not going to be in charge of securing the upcoming Democrat National Convention. We need to know that someone's been placed on suspension, that someone won't be in charge of the next Donald Trump rally. Now, I was encouraged to hear that the acting director, Rowe, has initiated a disciplinary investigation in addition to the ongoing Secret Service policy review. This is an important step. However, real accountability will require a comprehensive examination of all the facts, which still remain unclear. This past Friday, my investigative team went to Pennsylvania to meet with local law enforcement and document the scene. One of the concerning things my team was told is that no one from Secret Service has talked to them since the shooting. I don't know how an investigation into what failed can be conducted without talking to the officers and agencies who were relied upon to do much of the work. Many questions remain unanswered about the planning and performance of security for July 13th. While a host of errors led to this security disaster, we now know local enforcement officers were suspicious of the shooter 90 minutes in advance of the shooting. There are 2 glaring issues we need to focus on. First, why were the AGR grounds and the roof left unattended? Why was the AGR building, the shooter's perch, left outside the perimeter? Local law enforcement told my staff that they specifically flagged the vulnerability of the building to the Secret Service and were told that it would be taken care of. Clearly, these vulnerabilities were not addressed. Second, why was Donald Trump allowed to take the stage, and why wasn't he removed from the stage when a suspicious individual was taking increasingly suspicious activities? Over 20 minutes before President Trump began his speech, the Secret Service Command Center had been made aware of an individual with a rangefinder. At least 10 minutes before it was confirmed, the Secret Service's counter-sniper team had been made aware of the suspicious subject and provided a photograph and a detailed description. Why was the event not delayed until the individual was found and checked out? Interviews with local law enforcement paint a different picture in critical places from what we have been told by the Secret Service in other briefings. Now we need to hear from the Secret Service agents responsible for security that day. Our committee has formally requested interviews with those agents, but we have not yet been allowed to speak to them. I expect Director Rowe today to tell us when we will be allowed to talk to these people. Finally, let me close with this. Mistakes, grave mistakes were made on July 13th, but that does not take away from the bravery of dozens of federal, state, and local officers that day. We are grateful for their sacrifices and professionalism. They deserve the truth now also. It is our duty and our utmost responsibility to ensure that we learn from this failure and hold those responsible accountable.
I would now like to recognize Chairman Durbin of the Senate Judiciary Committee for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Senator Peters. This is a rare joint meeting of the 2 committees, but we have matching jurisdiction, and I think it's the most efficient way to get to the truth. So thank you for letting us join you today. We've all seen the movies. We've read the books. The international assassin with sophisticated technology, elaborate plans, well-honed skills, sets out to kill a leading political figure in the United States. But how does that match the reality of what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, when a 20-year-old introverted college student outsmarted one of the most sophisticated American law enforcement agencies in history, came within an inch of killing a former president of the United States, That's why we gathered today to ask these hard questions. There's more to this story and other aspects that we ought to consider as well. We cannot lose sight of the factor that contributed to the violence on July 13th. Widespread, easy access to AR-15 military-style rifles. While we rely on the Secret Service to protect elected officials, we must acknowledge the unique challenges they face in light of the proliferation of weapons of war on our street. Pennsylvania, like many states, allows individuals to openly carry a loaded rifle without a permit. To make matters worse, assault rifles can easily be purchased from unlicensed dealers without a background check because of dangerous loopholes on gun laws. The same kind of firearm has been used to carry out mass shootings in Newtown, Uvalde, Las Vegas, and Highland Park, Illinois, killing dozens of children and adults and injuring many more. Looking across this dais, I recognize we have our differences on many issues. But when it comes to the protection of the president and presidential candidates, we should stand united. We know that protecting our elected officials is essential to a functioning democracy. I hope this hearing can be an example of how we will work together on a bipartisan basis to not only understand this shocking event, but to ensure it never happens again. We must do this without the incendiary language and conspiracy mongering that too often dominates our political discourse today. Ongoing investigations by the Secret Service and the FBI are critical, but Congress, the victims' families, and the American people deserve transparency and accountability now. I'll now turn to my partner on the Judiciary Committee, Ranking Member Lindsey Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several of us from the military have a military background. If this happened in the military, a lot of people would be fired. And if a lot of people are not fired, the system failed yet again. Having said that, the people who are brave and jumped on the stage to protect the president need to be applauded. We need to learn what happened, make corrective action, but somebody's got to be fired. Nothing's going to change until somebody loses their job. Thank you.
It's the practice of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee to swear in witnesses. So if our two witnesses could please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. Our first witness is Ronald Rove, Jr. Mr. Rove is currently the acting director of the United States Secret Service. Prior to this role, Acting Director Rove was the 23rd Deputy Director of the Secret Service. He has had a distinguished 25-year career in the Secret Service, from coordinating major security operations to collaborating with other government and law enforcement agencies. Additionally, he has served as the Chief of Staff to the Director, as Deputy Assistant Director for the Office of Protective Operations, and as Deputy Assistant Director for the Office of Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs. Mr. Director, thank you for appearing before this committee today. You are now recognized for your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Peters, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Paul, Ranking Member Graham, and distinguished members of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. A critical part of the Secret Service mission is protecting our nation's current and former government leaders. The attempted assassination of former President Donald J. Trump on Saturday, July 13th, 2024, in Butler, Pennsylvania, was a failure on multiple levels. I join you and all Americans in condemning the horrific assault on former President Trump, Corey Comparator, James Copenhaver, and David Dutch. And I extend my deepest sympathies to the Comparator family and my sincere wishes for Mr. Copenhaver and Mr. Dutch's continued recovery. Before I begin, though, I want to commend the heroic actions of the men and women of the United States Secret Service on July 13th. Our special agents shielded the former president with their bodies while shots were still being fired, selflessly, willing to make the ultimate sacrifice without hesitation. I am extremely proud of these actions and those taken by the counter-sniper team to neutralize the threat that prevented further loss of life. And I applaud the actions of our tactical teams that responded so quickly. I would also like to express my gratitude to our federal, state, and local partners. We rely on these critical relationships, which have developed over decades of daily collaboration to secure protective events and conduct criminal investigations. As you're aware, there are multiple ongoing investigations of the attack and the security failures that occurred that day. I pledge my full support to those inquiries so the Secret Service, your committees, and the American people have a thorough and complete understanding of what happened leading up to and during July 13th. I will not wait for the results of those findings to assess where we failed that day. I have taken and will continue to take immediate steps to ensure we do not repeat those failures. Since my appointment as the acting director 1 week ago, I identified gaps in our security on July 13th and have implemented corrective actions. One of my first actions as acting director was traveling to the Butler Farm Show site to better understand how our protection failed. I went to the roof of the AGR building where the assailant fired shots, and I laid in a prone position to evaluate his line of sight. What I saw made me ashamed. As a career law enforcement officer and a 25-year veteran with the Secret Service, I cannot defend why that roof was not better secured. To prevent similar lapses from occurring in the future, I directed our personnel to ensure every event site security plan is thoroughly vetted by multiple experienced supervisors before it is implemented. It is clear to me that other protective enhancements could have strengthened our security at the Butler event. As such, I have directed the expanded use of unmanned aerial systems at protective sites to help detect threats on roofs and other elevated threats. I've also directed resources to facilitate our protective site communications, particularly our communications with our state and local partners. In addition, I have instructed the asset request for Secret Service protective details to be approved expeditiously and have ordered the maximum use of requested personnel at protective sites to address this heightened security environment. I've heard your calls for accountability, and I take them very seriously. And given the magnitude of this failure, the Secret Service's Office of Professional Responsibility is reviewing the actions and decision-making of Secret Service personnel in the lead-up to and on the day of the attack. If this investigation reveals that Secret Service employees violated agency protocols, those employees will be held accountable to our disciplinary process. With respect to congressional investigations and requests for information, I instructed my staff to provide full cooperation and respond expeditiously on a continuing basis to ensure you have the information you need to conduct your critical oversight. In my testimony before you today, I will provide details on the Secret Service's advanced security planning for the Butler Farm Show site. Facts as we know them regarding the incident itself, known breakdowns in executing the security plan, and corrective actions that the agency is taking to ensure that nothing like this happens again. But I do not believe that inadequate time to plan for this event was a factor in the failure. As you saw in my written statement, I am prepared to provide an overview of the security plan leading up to and during the July 13th attack. However, I would like to point out that based on what I know right now, neither the Secret Service counter-sniper teams nor members of the former president's security detail a man on the roof of the AGR building with a firearm. It is my understanding those personnel were not aware the assailant had a firearm until they heard gunshots. Prior to that, they were operating with the knowledge that local law enforcement was working an issue of a suspicious individual prior to the shots being fired. I regret that information was not passed to Congress and the public sooner with greater frequency. And I fear this lack of information has given rise to multiple false and dangerous conspiracy theories about what took place that day. And I want to debunk these theories. Let me address one conspiracy directly. The Secret Service counter-sniper neutralized the assailant within seconds after the assailant fired his weapon. That counter-sniper had full discretion to use deadly force to stop an attacker and did not need to seek authorization of the selfless dedication of our employees to the mission. Every day across the globe, the men and women answer the call to protect our nation's leaders, and the standard is no fail for a reason. During our current high operational tempo, I want and I need
management of all FBI personnel, budget, administration, as well as infrastructure.
Who was also struck by a bullet fired from the shooter's rifle.
Conduct a full importance, making it essential to inform the American public and Congress what is known right now with full transparency. The investigation remains focused, of course, on determining motive, identifying any potential co-conspirators or others with nothing has been ruled out. The investigation has not identified a motive, nor any co-conspirators or others with advanced knowledge. To date, the FBI team has conducted more than 460 interviews, executed search warrants, including at the shooter's residence, and seized electronic media to include phones, laptops, hard drives, and thumb drives. Legal process has been issued to dozens of companies, and we've received more than 2,000 tips from the public. The full resources of the FBI have been brought to bear in furtherance of the investigation. Agents, analysts, professional staff, experts. I've personally visited the site of this horrific attack and seen firsthand the work of FBI Pittsburgh and our partners on the front line, and want to thank all involved for their ongoing and tireless efforts to get the answers that we need and to deliver justice. Specialized resources deployed included evidence response teams, victim services specialists, laboratory and operational technology division resources to process physical and digital evidence, a shooting reconstruction team. Additionally, our explosive experts have analyzed the 3 IEDs recovered, 2 from the shooter's vehicle, one from the family residence. And our behavioral analysis unit, importantly, is helping to build a profile of the shooter to include his mental state. I want to provide a brief highlighted overview of the timeline that has been established to date through witness interviews and other information. Again, this is our understanding at present and is subject to change and further refinement as more facts are collected. On July 3rd, the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania was announced. On July 6th, the shooter registered to attend the rally and performed a search for, quote, how far was Oswald from Kennedy. On July 7th, the shooter traveled from his home to the Butler Farm Show grounds and remained there for approximately 20 minutes. We assess this shows advanced planning and reconnaissance on his part. On July 12th, the shooter traveled from his home to the Clairton Sportsman Club, where he practiced shooting. On the morning of July 13th, at approximately 10 a.m., the shooter returned to the farm show grounds and remained there for about 70 minutes before returning home again. At approximately 1:30 p.m., while at the residence, the shooter's father gave him a rifle for the purpose he believed of going back to the sportsman club. About 25 minutes later, the shooter purchased ammunition while en route to the Butler Farm Show grounds. The subject then arrived at the scene and was moving around the farm show grounds close to the American Glass Research AGR building, from which he ultimately committed the attack. Shortly thereafter, at approximately 3:51 p.m., the shooter flew a drone approximately 200 yards from the farm show grounds for about 11 minutes. The drone and controller were later found in the subject's car. Analysis has not revealed any photos or video taken by the drone, but we can confirm that he was live streaming at the time and would have been able to view it on his controller. The first reported sighting of the shooter by local law enforcement was at approximately 4:26 p.m. At approximately 5:10 p.m., the shooter was again identified by local law enforcement as a suspicious person around the AGR building. And at approximately 5:14 p.m., a local SWAT operator took a photo of the shooter. At about 5:32 p.m., local SWAT observed the shooter next to the AGR building using his phone, browsing news sites, and with a rangefinder. At approximately 5:38 p.m., the photo of the shooter taken earlier was sent to local SWAT operators in a text message group. Subsequently, approximately 25 minutes prior to the shooting, the U.S. Secret Service command post was notified of a suspicious person. Officers lost sight of the subject from approximately 6:02 p.m. to 6:08 p.m., but continued to communicate with each other in an attempt to locate him. Recently discovered video from a local business shows the shooter pulling himself up onto the AGR building rooftop at approximately 6:06 p.m. And at approximately 6:08 p.m., the subject was observed on the roof by local law enforcement. At approximately 6:11 p.m., a local police officer was lifted to the roof by another officer, saw the shooter, and radioed that he was armed with, quote, a long gun. Within approximately the next 30 seconds, the shots were fired. The evidence recovery team found 8 shell casings at the scene next to the shooter's body. We believe the subject, the shooter, fired 8 rounds. While the investigation has not determined motive, the investigative team continues to review information from legal returns, including online and social media accounts. Something just very recently uncovered that I want to share is a social media account which is believed to be associated with the shooter in about the 2019-2020 timeframe. There were over 700 comments posted from this account. Some of these comments, if ultimately attributable to the shooter, appear to reflect anti-Semitic and anti-immigration themes, to espouse political violence, and are described as extreme in nature. While the investigative team is still working to verify this account to determine if it did in fact belong to the shooter, we believe it important to share and note it today, particularly given the general absence of other information to date from social media and other sources of information that reflect on the shooter's potential motive and mindset. These are the facts, in part, that the investigation has revealed to date. While the shooter is dead, our work is very much ongoing and urgent. Thank you, and I look forward to answering any and all questions.
Thank you, Mr. Abate. We'll now proceed. Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Graham will ask the first two questions. I will then ask question Ranking Member Paul, and then after that we will alternate between members of the judiciary, recognized by Chairman Durbin, and members of the Homeland Security Committee, recognized by me. With that, Senator Durbin, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Senator Peters. I would like to begin by making a statement. It's not in the form of a question, and you'll understand why when I say it. In 20 days, we're going to start the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. I have been briefed by the law enforcement agencies plans for security for that event. Tens of thousands of people will be there, including some of the highest ranking politicians in the United States. I trust that both of your agencies can answer in the affirmative if I ask you whether you're actively engaged in working with the development of security plan, taking into consideration the lessons of July 13th.
Senator, that is 100% yes from the Secret Service.
Yes, from the FBI as well, sir. We've been working on this for well over a year in preparation.
I'm not going to ask for details for obvious reasons, but I do want to ask a question about the Secret Service staffing. Congress has nearly doubled the budget for the Secret Service over the last 10 years, from $1.8 billion in fiscal year 2014 to $3 billion in fiscal year 2024. Despite this large increase in funding, the number of agents in protective